Good afternoon, and welcome to the Innovative Equipment Smart Upgrade session as part of PennDOT's first ever Virtual Innovation Week. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Danielle Klinger-Grumbine with PennDOT's Bureau of Innovations, and I will be your host for today's session. Following each presentation today, there will be a facilitated question and answer period. If you have any questions for our speakers during today's session, please use the chat pod on the right-hand side of your screen to submit your questions. We will take questions in the order in which they are received. In the event that we do not get to all questions during today's session, we will be circling back with our speakers to get the answers to your questions, and we will be sending those out to you following the event. So throughout the Virtual Innovation Week, I also encourage you to view the more than 50 innovative tools, materials, applications, and technologies that are on display in our virtual exhibit hall. The exhibit hall is located on our event website at www.penndot.gov/innovationsweek. These innovations are being used by federal, state, and local agencies and could help you do your job safer, better, faster, and even save you money. There is also a contact form on the virtual exhibit hall page that will allow you to submit any questions that you have about a particular innovation. If you do submit a question via that contact form, we will get you connected with the subject matter expert for that particular innovation. And finally, before I introduce our first speaker for today, please be advised that this session is being recorded. A recording of this session, along with all the other sessions from the Virtual Innovation Week, will be available on our event website within the next week or so. Also, if you want to hear a playback of today's session, if you click on the participant link in the calendar invitation that you received for the session, you will be able to listen to the session in case there are any parts that you might have missed or want to listen to again. So our first speaker for today is James Floor, who is the Specifications and New Equipment Section Chief in PennDOT's Bureau of Maintenance and Operations. And I'd like to welcome Jim to the call.
Thank you, Daniel. Do I have control?
Yes. Look in the PowerPoint. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so good morning. Good afternoon. So first off, we're going to review today why our dump trucks are not just dump trucks. There's more than just a dump truck. First off, we design our dump trucks as a multi-purpose truck. We do not design them just for construction purposes or just for plowing snow. We offer 3 different sizes. Today we're going to focus mainly on the tandem axle, but we do offer a single axle version and a triaxle version of 38,000 pounds. Our tandem axles are 62,000 pounds, and our triaxles are 72,380. Our main focus on building a truck is to plow snow. That is our main activity. That is the brunt of what we do. We do not build a lightweight truck to increase hauling capacity as our private sector typically does. We focus on building for strength and durability of components. Our secondary features do allow for all-season activities, such as an integrated coal chute. We do provide a 25-ton pintle hitch with each truck and trailer air brakes so that we can pull trailers for all-season activities. And this is standard on each truck. We also have to worry about backing into items such as pavers, stone chippers, and other equipment that we may be hauling to for a job to deliver materials. As I said, our main focus is on strength and durability of the components, simply because of our snow plowing activities. Our load capacities and capabilities are a large concern, as we do typically run right up against the edge as far as weight requirements and restrictions. And we do offer and include winter features and options as standard equipment, such as heated fuel and also window glass heaters. So to talk specifically about the truck, our frame rails are a required single rail design. A lot of times when you get into a triaxle or a tandem axle truck in the private sector, you'll find dual frame rails where they make the rail a little smaller, a little thicker, but they'll double it up. We stopped that several years ago due to the corrosion and the materials that we operate in. We've had severe issues with frame rails actually splitting, coming apart, spreading apart, simply because of the corrosion entering in between the frame rails. So we now offer as standard on all of our trucks either a 7/16 or a 1/2 inch thick single rail frame rail system. Typical, your standard truck, maybe a 1/4 inch or only 5/16, and as I said, sometimes they would double them up. It's just a cheaper way, less expensive way of doing it to get the stronger frame. We do also, as standard offering, provide front frame rail extensions to attach our plow frames to. Typically, if a private contractor is going to lease onto the department with one of their standard trucks, they're required to put on some kind of plow frame extension to be able to put on the plow frame, and that typically will bolt on. Ours are part of the frame rail and are not bolted on. They're an integral part and just an extension of the frame rail. Our plow frame bolts on either side of our frame rail are built for strength with 5 1-inch grade 8 bolts on either side. This is kind of overkill. However, personally, I have seen these snap already, and our frame rails still withstand that. So we typically are a lot heavier than what your standard would be. As it says down there, your standard frame, we use brackets and angles, to extend from the front of the radiator, and then typically the braces are underneath the frame of various positions, sometimes even attaching to a front steering axle. And I apologize, but for some reason I can't forward to the next slide. Thank you. So our next screen here simply is a picture for comparison of our plow frame that I was talking about. To the left, you can see our plow frame integrated to the complete front of the truck and is actually part of the truck. To the right is a plow frame that you can purchase from a plow manufacturer to put on any standard dump truck. As you can see, that plow frame to the right bolts at various positions in different areas, and that particular one, as it appears, does bolt to the front axle, which is obviously a weak point and not really something that you want to be pushing on. Our plow frames are designed to pick up plows. Some of our plows weigh in excess of 5,000 pounds. Some of our large reversible plows. This design also allows for a ram extension that will attach to the orange part that you can see there that is actually the lifting hoist. Some of our reversible plows require a little bit of an extension as to pick up directly in the center of the plow, so that when that plow is picked up, it is centered and doesn't pick up heavy to one side or the other. This design for a plow frame and front plow frame rail extension also provides us a place to the right. You can see a piece of deck plate, and underneath that deck plate is actually a chain box where our folks can provide an area to throw in their tire chains and other small items that they wouldn't be allowed to keep in the cab. That keeps them out of the weather, out of the snow, so if they are plowing and need to stop in the middle of a plowing session, they're getting chains out that are not frozen together or already wet or anything. Danielle, if you could please to the next slide. So our next slide presents some information on our front axle. We've found that our trucks, we are speccing a 20,000 pound front axle, which is the heaviest front axle that we can legally provide. There are heavier front axles available. However, law requires 20,000 pounds or less. Over 20,000 pounds requires a permit to transport any truck from any place or anywhere that it goes. So we stick with a 20,000 pound axle. A standard dump truck offering is anywhere between 16 and 18,000, and a set forward or set back design. And the reason for this picture is to present and help understand our set forward axle design that we spec on all of our dump trucks. If you notice to the left, our truck, that front axle sits out, that the front of the steering tires are almost flush with the grill. That actually moves our center of gravity for our trucks forward, and when we pick a plow up, it actually pushes some of the weight of that plow to the back axles, allowing us to pick up a heavier plow than if we were to have a truck, which is presented on the right, that has a set back axle. If you look at the truck on the right, the axle is pushed back approximately anywhere between 12 and 14 inches. And mostly this is done for steering. This allows for a shorter turning radius, but does present issues whenever you try and put a plow on the front of a truck, as it puts that tipping point more towards the front and presents a weight challenge and puts more weight on that front axle. Next, please. There we go. Next, we're talking about the tires that we offer, standard and rims. PennDOT specs out on both our tandem and our triaxles, specifically a 425 22.5 inch load range L tire. These tires are rated at 10,500 pounds each, so that allows us 21,000 pounds of weight that we're allowed to put on the front axle. So we are overrating the tires a little bit more for what the axle's rated. Your typical dump truck will normally use a 315 size tire, 22 and a half or 24 inch tire. And these tires are rated at only 7,750 pounds. So they would not stand up to the 20,000 pound axle. We would be overloading the tires whenever we pick our plow up. Our rear tires that we use is a 22 and a half on a 12 by 25 rim, rated at 11,500 pounds each. As you can see, the standard is more of a 22 and a half by 9 and rated at about 10,000 pounds. So we have to get up to that 23,000 pound as we put the 23,000 pound axles in the rear. Something else that PennDOT does is exclusively with all of our trucks is we utilize a dual steering box design. So for both of our tandems and our triaxles, we actually have 2 steering boxes mounted to this truck with pitman arms and drag links attached to both sides, so that we're controlling each tire with a tie rod connecting the two. This actually allows us weights up to 24,000 pounds to be moved according to the steering box manufacturer. And again, just allows for that possibility of overweighing. As I stated in the beginning, you know, our load capacities are a concern at all times. So this just helps to alleviate that and ensure that we're not overloading our front axles. Our rear axles, as I said earlier, are 23,000 pounds, 23,000 pound weight rating. The standard is normally a 23,000 pound. However, we go with an extra heavy wall thickness. A normal wall thickness is 5/16, and we spec a 7/16 or ½ inch wall thickness of our rear axle design with a 2.19 inch thickness axle. That ensures that we get the heaviest available rear end configurations possible in the 23,000 pound range. Our rims are 22.5 by 8.25. These are rated at 8,000 pounds apiece. Standard again is the 22.5, same size, but are rated at 6,000 to 7,400 pounds. We actually spec a little bit heavier rim to ensure that, again, we're okay if we get into an overloading situation. Our rear tires, we spec the 12R 22.5 with a load range H, which is a little higher than your normal. It runs at 7,390 pounds. Your standard is an 11R 22.5, which is a little bit smaller tire, and the ratings are smaller and are only up to 6610. So by going to that 12R tire, we can actually get a little more weight on the back of our trucks. Some of the winter specific options that we provide with all of our trucks, whether it be a tandem, single axle, or a triaxle, is all of our trucks come through with heated windshields. And this actually goes along the side of each windshield and all the way across the bottom. It is an electric feature that turns on, kind of like your defrosters in the back window of your car. And we provide this in not only the windshield, but all of our mirrors as well. So all of our mirrors are heated for reverse viewing as well. Something else that we put on all of our trucks that your typical dump truck would not have is we offer a road and air temperature sensor. Currently we're using the Bacillus system, and this system displays directly into our hydraulic controller display and will give you live, accurate data as far as road temperatures and air temperatures. In the past, we have tried other temperature sensors. Problem being is they were not very accurate. We found that this system here, although a little more expensive, is calibratable and also is integratable, as I said, into our hydraulic control system so that we don't need a separate display for that. Along with that, this also is transferable to our AVL system, which I'll touch on here in just a second, but this information is all transferable through into that. One of the other options that we put on every truck, again, whether it be single, tandem, or triaxle, is we call it a snow valve. And this valve actually turns off outside air to the intake of our engines. In the past, we have plugged up air filters because of snow from plowing coming back over top of the hood, back over the cab, whatever else, and actually sucking snow into our air cleaners and shutting our trucks down. So we've taken and provided this with each truck, and what it does is it moves air to the inside underneath the hood so that that snow cannot get sucked in and plug any filter. Our hydraulic control system is a live, constant hydraulic function and is transferable to all of our AVL data. So we transfer all of our spreader information via AVL for data capturing. This system allows operation whether we're moving, whether we're stopped, doesn't matter. It is always on and always live. Each truck is also equipped with pre-wet systems. We provide currently 120-gallon tanks. We've actually just upped those tanks to 195 gallons for a total of 390 gallons that we can carry on a tandem and triaxle. This is for pre-wetting all of our salt, and with our normal load and a tandem axle, we can provide 26 gallons of brine pre-wetting to each ton of material that is put off the back of the truck. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself there. We also utilize an 8-inch inverted cylinder so that material cannot gather on the seals and eat any of the seals up or ruin our cylinders. We utilize either a stainless steel or aluminum body. We do not offer a steel body due to corrosion, as we're typically hauling salt. The aluminum body has been the standard for years. A few years ago, we started offering stainless just for the durability. All of our bodies are built to severe duty capabilities to be operational while in motion if need be. And we utilize extra heavy severe duty hinge points and brackets. Basically everything is overbuilt and over-designed for what we're doing. There's an example of our aluminum body on the left, and on the right is an example of our cross-memberless stainless steel. That is a steel version, but it would look identical to that. So those are the two bodies that we use and utilize exclusively. That is a quick rundown of our trucks. Hopefully that provides some information as to why our trucks are a little bit different than your typical contractor dump truck, with some added features and basically overbuilt. So with that, Danielle, I'll turn it back to you if there's any questions.
Hey Jim, got a couple questions in here. The first one is why do you utilize stainless steel and aluminum bodies?
For corrosion purposes, we utilized steel years ago. Back in the 80s, the department was offering steel bodies, and we had severe issues with corrosion. Bodies were actually rusting out, rusting through. So by going to aluminum, we cut down on that corrosion. The aluminum bodies work very well for corrosion resistance. However, they are a softer material. So we started offering the stainless steel to be able to provide the strength that a steel body would and the corrosion protectiveness that an aluminum body would as well.
Next question is just all rock in the aluminum beds during the off-season.
Can you repeat that?
Can you haul rock in the aluminum beds during the off-season?
We can and we do, but typically if you're hauling any kind of a sizable stone or rock, they'll either lay plywood in the bottom or put a load of like 2As, something smaller, a smaller stone in the bottom, so that when you dump those rocks in, it does not damage the floor of the body. So you can, but you have to do it cautiously.
And as for right now, the last question we have, are there any other options or versions of dump truck that PennDOT purchases?
So we do offer a few different versions of trucks that do not dump or that dump or spread material differently. We've the last couple of years been experimenting with an ejector body truck that is basically a hydraulic ram with a false bulkhead in the front, and that actually pushes the material off. That body does not dump, but will still disperse material the same as any dump body. As I said, it just doesn't dump. The other option that we have out there and have been using is an auger floor truck. So the body still dumps. However, during a spreading event, just to eliminate or to disperse your material, the augers actually auger the material out the bottom of the bed, either to the front or to the rear, and you don't have to dump. And so the advantage to both of these bodies is while you're spreading material in a snow event, you do not have to lift the bed to dump back to keep filling a salt box or a spreader box. They will disperse material without having to dump that or move that bed while you're going down the road.
Jim, we got actually two more came in. The first one, with all the specs you gave about the front axle, how does it rate when you add a wing plow?
So during winter operations, PennDOT is exempt from weight restrictions. And we do put any truck that has a wing plow on it, we do put a rubber bumper between the frame rail and the spring on whatever side that plow is put on there. And I apologize, I forget the exact name of it, but it is a bumper that keeps the weight off of the spring if need be, because typically when you add that wing plow, you're putting about 1,500 pounds to 2,000 pounds extra on one side of the truck. So in the past, we've experimented with adding leaf springs to one side, but we found that the most efficient is to put the rubber bumpers in so that the truck can't lean. But it does present issues, as I said, with overloading, which is why we offer the heavier rims and the heavier tires.
And the last question we got in, can the beds be treated or coated with any material to prevent the salt from deteriorating the beds?
I suppose that they could. We've actually experimented with several different items on the entire trucks to try and prevent corrosion. The problem with what we found is most of the items out there are a yearly application. So even if we put something on from new that is a corrosion preventative material, typically they're spray on, and even if we do put them on from new, they typically only will last about a year. So after that first year, it then becomes the county's responsibility, who's responsible for that truck, to reapply and reapplicate. Some counties are choosing to do that. Some don't feel or see the benefit. We were actually experimenting with a couple different ones currently, but to date have not found anything that holds up more than a year or two without being reapplied.
All right, thank you so much, Jim. Again, if anyone has questions for Jim, please enter them into the chat bot. We are now going to be moving on to our next speakers, but again, at the end of the session, if we have time to get to additional questions that were submitted from any of our presenters, we will do so at the end of the session. So our speakers today are Mike Martin, who is the Fleet Management Division Chief in PennDOT's Bureau of Maintenance and Operations, Kalel Conte and Richard Gall, who are the Director and Assistant Director, respectively, of the Bureau of Correctional Industries for the Department of Corrections. I'd like to welcome Mike, Kalel, and Richard to today's session.
Thank you. This is Mike Martin speaking. Let's see, let me click in here. There we go. Okay. So I'm Mike, Division Chief at the Fleet Management here, and with me is Rich Gall, Assistant Director at Corrections Industries, and we'll start our presentation on our partnership for equipment refurbishment.
All right, how you doing? This is Rich Gall. First and foremost, thank you for inviting PCI to be part of this. We're really excited about this brand new partnership we have with PennDOT and PCI, as we call it, Pennsylvania Correctional Industries. Basically, just to give you guys just a general overview, the benefits of working together here is with PCI and our inmates. It gives our inmates a meaningful employment opportunity for the inmates within the jail system. It helps them understand what welding, painting, sandblasting, different things of that nature. We provide a nice marketable skill. So this way, when they do get released, they have a halfway chance of getting a pretty good job, if you will. What they do is they learn to be part of a team and how to be responsible with that. So what we do is, by doing this, we give them a regular 42 cents an hour. I know it doesn't sound like a lot. And then we give them bonuses. They can add up to about 70 cents. So it comes to about $1.12 an hour they could get. But by doing that, what happens is there's certain things that they have to do. They have to make sure that their work that meets or exceeds the requirements set forth within the spec. So for instance, anything that we do here with the snow plows or the rims or anything of that nature, they still have to meet these quality assurances. So that helps both us and the customer to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. They do stuff of attendance, they show up at work, and then they work together. What we do is we have what's called quotas. So they have to meet a certain quota that they may have to get 2 or 3 snowplows done within a day that's done perfect to make sure that we can maintain this good relationship with the customer. So what this does is it provides a needed service to the state agencies, and then it helps with the re-entry program. And with this particular shop, we plan on employing about 100 inmates.
Okay, and then from the PennDOT side, our big goal right now is to extend the life of the equipment. As Jim mentioned when talking about how we spec dump trucks, and I'll talk about this a little more on some future slides, but you know, our biggest enemy really is rust and corrosion. So what we hope to get out of this is to extend the life of the equipment, and we can use those other capital equipment budget funds to purchase other equipment. And through this process and this partnership, you know, there's no bidding required, and we can move forward in that manner. So a little bit of a history of SCI and this partnership.
Yeah, with this right here, once we had this partnership with PennDOT and PCI, what we did is PCI, there was no money exchanged from PennDOT. This was just a commitment saying that they would look at us to possibly utilize us for possible work. PCI invested about $10 million into this state-of-the-art facility. We have brand new huge blast systems. You'll see some pictures later on. We have a paint booth. We have just state-of-the-art equipment there that will rival anyone. And what that does is that will help us achieve our goals. And by doing this, the partnership we created with PennDOT, DGS, which they had to do the bidding, Department of Corrections, which is we're a bureau within corrections, and then PCI, which is Pennsylvania Correctional Industries, to ensure that everyone had a voice when we were building this together. This was something that really went beyond our wildest dreams. It was about a 48,000 square foot building that at one time had a gravel floor and just walls. And again, we'll share some pictures at the end to show you where we are today, and it's just incredible what we do. We invested in a new brake press, new shears, the paint and sandblasting booth, and it will fit all of PennDOT's equipment.
So, rust and corrosion remains to be one of our worst enemies to our equipment, and for the DOTs, the local municipalities that have to deal with winter, you know, that issue is just enormous. So one of the things that we try to do to combat that, Jim talked about that and how we spec dump trucks. And you mentioned a little bit about pilot programs. So we do a lot of pilot programs, whether it's different paints, coatings, protective products, materials. They're ongoing. We'll typically put, if it's a dump truck, we'll have 2 dump trucks at a county, one treated, one not treated. We monitor that and look at the progress and kind of see how beneficial that the product is. So that's ongoing. We have a lot of pilots out there with many different products and materials. The other thing we do, equipment wash programs. We were fortunate a couple years ago to be able to build a number of truck washes throughout the Commonwealth. That was huge. A great way to combat this nemesis, if you will. But along with that too is our wash programs to make sure there's a schedule, to make sure they're getting cleaned properly. But the truck washes and those truck programs have really gone a long way and will continue to go a long way with managing the rust and corrosion. The other thing too is our preventative maintenance program. We're always looking at that, making adjustments to that. How do we look at that? One of the things we do is the QA process. We go through a QA. We're working with IT right now to make that process electronic. That way we can pull the data out real easily, get reports, where we have with preventative maintenance, kind of identify trends, make adjustments to our program to ultimately extend the life of our equipment. And we can now break that down to manufacturer's year. It's really neat the way we're moving forward with monitoring the preventative maintenance program. And then the third thing there is what we're here to talk about today is the refurbishing program, another tool to ultimately extend the life of our equipment. So what are we focusing on? Initially, we thought, okay, well, we're going to look at what we call our critical core equipment. And again, that goes back to winter. These are pieces of equipment we use in the winter time. So our critical core equipment, dump trucks, loaders, and crew cabs. So initially with this program, we're able to get a wheel refurbishing line started. Rich, that was about a year and a half ago now.
Yes.
We started that. A few months ago, the rest of the facility was completed, and the plan was to run plows through the program. So we started with plow. So we're kind of focusing on that critical core equipment and expanding from there. I know we are sending over some trailers. There's some loaders being lined up to be sent over. But the neat thing, as Rich said, there was a lot of folks that sat down to the table to figure this out, and the facility will house any piece of equipment. We'll have pictures of the paint booths and the drying booths. They're big enough, long enough, deep enough to pull a lowboy trailer in, tall enough for our tallest piece of equipment, our loaders. So there was foresight there to look to the future on all our equipment. So let's talk a little bit about logistics. All the painting projects, all these projects are coordinated with the county that's dropping off the equipment and Forest SCI and fleet management. We want to be in that process. We want to monitor this program. The other big thing that came up pretty early on was delivery and pickup. Initially, like I said, about a year and a half ago, we started with the wheel refurbishing line, and we were using our pony truck system to get those wheels from the eastern part of the state over to Forest. Now, as we transition to equipment, we're looking at the low boys to make those moves. But we knew there was going to be a lot of folks dropping off, picking up. We wanted to make sure that we were doing that efficiently and that the turnaround time was pretty quick. So we worked through that, and now that the delivery pickup is outside the fence, so we don't have to worry about background checks, all that, it's pretty efficient, it's fast. Everything's there that the delivery person needs, whether it's a tow motor to load, unload, and then turn and leave. So that worked out pretty well. For the PennDOT folks, for the Pennsylvania Turnpike folks, the billing, the invoicing, the quotes, all that is going to be completed in SAP to make that a very efficient system there and monitor the piece of equipment as it's moving through the facility. The last point there was, again, just emphasizing with the counties that we're now transitioning to equipment. Just want to make sure we're efficient with loading up the low boys and making that turnaround. Yeah, it's not nothing for me. There we go. So, return on investment. Again, the biggest number one right there is we're looking to prolong the life of the equipment. And there's many other things there too. Easier to identify cracks or defects. Again, we want to make sure we got the wheel refinishing line, that we have a good program to refinish our wheels. The other thing, and Jimmy, you mentioned it about our frames. We have issues. We've made changes over the last few years, but we've had major issues with frame rails on dump trucks because of corrosion. We're looking to identify a package there for our dump trucks to paint frame rails. And again, this is, like I said, right now we're at Plows. We have a couple of trailers going over, some loaders. So we're expanding this as we go to all of our equipment. The other thing I've listed there is, of course, the better appearance of the equipment. That kind of leads into the next item, which is a higher dollar value at auction. So some members of the team at Fleet Management have really been looking at all that data on the auction side. And what we're finding is, for example, loaders. We found one buyer that's buying a lot of our loaders. And as we start to look at, and we're comparing apples to apples, we're looking at our loaders and what's available at auction at the same time from the private sector, same year, same make, same model. Our equipment typically has lower hours, lower engine hours, but at auction, our equipment's coming in extremely low, and mainly due to the environment it's in. Those loaders are sitting in stock or at salt zones, or they're playing in all those materials that we have to do, that we need to do in the wintertime, that it wreaks havoc on that equipment. So what we found is a buyer, one in particular, is buying a lot of our loaders and basically throwing some paint on it, turning around and selling it in a short amount of time and actually making money at that. So I mean, that's not our main goal, but I think there are opportunities there that we're looking at experimenting with. But again, our main objective is to prolong the life of the equipment. Okay, here's some pictures. I tell you, this is really an amazing facility. The opportunity to start with a clean slate, like Rich said, it was a stone floor, completely empty. A lot of thought went into what this facility should look like, the flow, and I think just nailed it. You can see there on the left, there's a photo of a sandblast booth. Again, you can get a low boy trailer in there. You can get a loader, whatever, any piece of equipment that we have will fit in there. In the middle of that's looks like the drying booth, and to the right, some of the fabricating, welding, and those type of things. And again, the way it's set up and the equipment, a lot of thought was put into the flow as it comes in, gets sandblasted, it's inspected, metal work that has to be done. A lot of thought went into that. I think the process is pretty nice, pretty efficient. Some more fabricating equipment. Now, the last time I was there was for the grand opening in January. This stuff wasn't there, so once I'm able to go back, I'm pretty excited to see all this and see that flow. But you're looking at press brakes and plate rollers and all the equipment needed to fabricate, and pretty much they're capable of making any part that may be needed for repairs on when this stuff comes in. So it's really impressive. So, like I said, we started with the wheel refurbishing line, to extend the life of the rims. Talk a little bit of cost for the rims. It's about $35 per rim. Every rim is inspected. If it does not pass inspection, we're notified. It gets shipped back. So we try to make sure that we're doing some sort of inspection before we send it up. And then we're looking at snow plows. We've done a number of snow plows. There's some pictures coming up of that, and we're looking to expand into other equipment. Pretty much everything we have. So here's some before pictures. So you can see on the left there's a picture of a plow was delivered. It was blasted, which now makes the damage visible, and a better opportunities there for quotes and things of that nature. There's another picture identifying damage by blasting, comes out. And all those repairs are able to be made. Now there's a plow that's completed.
The same plow.
Is that the same plow?
Yeah.
Okay. Next one, there it is, another plow.
And then, again, just so everybody understands, our mission, PCI's mission is to teach inmates how to work within Pennsylvania. Again, it's a very straightforward understanding that if we show these inmates that, with hard work and dedication, there is something outside of the prison system. Not all of them are criminals, so to speak. Sometimes it's just like anything else. Sometimes we got caught doing something, or we didn't get caught doing something, they did, and they're in there. We try to help them through the process, try to make sure that they understand exactly what's what, and try to give them that support system to help them along. We believe that everybody needs at least a little help and a second chance, if you will. And by doing this, it really helps them, as well as to help the jail be safe. The more inmates that we have working, the less time that they have just idle time, and everybody knows what idle time does, right? Gets you in trouble. So if we get them working, we get them tired. At the end of the day, they don't want to fight, they don't want to pick on anybody, they just want to, watch a little TV or have a little snack and then go to bed, so to speak. So that's the main objective for us. Again, we are self-sustaining. We don't receive any government funds. We don't receive any general revenue funds. Everything that we receive is just through the customers. Now, people would say, well, we have the government funds coming through PennDOT, but if you have to spend with us or another vendor, so we just ask you guys just to take another look at us, try to help us along. Again, we're like a sole source, if you will. We could basically do anything that you guys want, within reason, of course, and we'll always be honest and upfront. But we only can sell to nonprofits, local and state governments. We cannot sell to the public, unfortunately. And we can't align ourselves with any private companies. Working with PennDOT has helped PCI meet the mission, and we appreciate that. And our hope is with PennDOT and the support with the joint venture that we've established that will continue going on for a long period of time. And it's not just with the PennDOT, it's, Turnpike's interested in stuff, local governments. We want to expand this and hopefully take the wheels, the snowplows, as Mike said, and then maybe expand it. We're doing some loaders and graders and some summer equipment, different things of that nature. Just give it a fresh coat of paint, see if there's any weaknesses there, fix them, and then provide them back to PennDOT. I appreciate you guys giving us time on that.
Thank you. That's it. If there's any questions.
Okay, have a couple questions here. The first one, is it possible to tour the Forest County facility?
Yes, for us, during COVID, it's a little tougher than non-COVID, but I would recommend anyone that wants to come up to see the facility, to go through your chain of command, and we can get you a gate pass. We welcome visitors. The only requirement that you need is just your state employee. You just bring your ID. You have the authority from your supervisor or your manager, if you will, and we can conduct tours all day, every day.
Next question, who can participate in the equipment refurbishing program?
As we said, that anyone can participate as long as you're a nonprofit, a 501c, local or state governments. Unfortunately, we can't do anything with any private individuals or any private companies at this time.
Okay, again, my thanks to Mike and Kalel and Richard for your presentation today. It's a fantastic example of cross-agency collaboration. So hopefully those listeners out there will maybe take advantage of some other partnership opportunities, other collaboration opportunities. So thank you again for your presentation today, and great information. Okay, well, that brings us to our next two speakers today. We have Justin Mickey, who is the Regional Fleet Advisor, and Jessica Schugert, who is the Roadway Programs Coordinator for the Fleet Management Division in PennDOT's Bureau of Maintenance and Operations. I'd like to welcome Jess and Justin to today's session. You now have
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone.
I'm going to start off here. We're going to talk about an equipment replacement lifecycle tool that's been in development for a couple of years from PennDOT. I'm going to just touch base a little bit on the history, where it came from, how it started, and some of the foundation, and then Jess is going to take over and talk about what it's become and what the tool kind of is at this point. So, let's see if I can get this. So basically, I want to say about 2015, we were really going back through, looking at how we replaced equipment. Everything was just based on a life cycle that was based on years only, essentially. And several things were leading us up to having to reevaluate this. Number one, obviously, just like anybody, was money. The capital equipment budget wasn't really increasing at any rate, much less a rate that could keep up with the increasing cost of equipment. So everything boiled down, it basically came down to a lack of equipment. So the budget could no longer support the life cycles. The life cycles were extended, and along with extending the life cycle costs, we were able to stay closer to being on cycle, but our annual repair costs went up, and we were getting rid of equipment based on time that we should have kept, and keeping equipment that basically was no longer efficient to continue to operate. We need to be able to label equipment, whether it should be replaced or repaired, on something other than just the age. So that was our task at hand. We've started to dig through. We have roughly 25,000 total pieces of equipment. The old model, like I said, was just based on age, so we wanted to keep some element of age in there. And the age, though, as it was used, wasn't an engine hour or an actual production hour. It was based on payroll hours, so it wasn't 100% accurate as to what was put onto the equipment. So we wanted to set out and look into that and kind of establish benchmarks for the usage. We had to gather data and identify ways that we could potentially increase our life expectancy. As the data is reviewed, we had to organize it so we could actually make a report out of all the pages and pages of information we're dragging in. And we also wanted to try and develop a scoring criteria that we could apply to the entire fleet. So once those benchmarks and scoring were set, then we could start changing those benchmarks to try and extend our life cycle. So we had to figure out the availability of and standards for the automated reporting and our data management so we could be accurate and efficient later as we started to develop a tool. So what we looked for, we wanted to keep some time based, so we actually used our depreciation schedule, or basically a calculation that's used for depreciation for accidents. We examined several other things that were cost-based, like our life-to-date fuel consumption, which gave us a good number of how hard a piece of equipment worked, a little bit more accurate than what the payroll hours were. And the life-to-date repair costs, like I mentioned, as we saw the equipment get older and that corrosion started to set in, we started to see higher and higher repair costs, annual cost to operate. We took those life-to-date fuel and we looked at it a couple different ways. Basically our cost in ratios are miles per gallon, gallons per lane mile, repair costs per gallon of fuel. And we kind of started digging through that to figure out which way we wanted to go. We put our life-to-date information together along with our physical inspections. Dan, the other regional fleet advisor, and myself actually went through a lot of equipment and looked at our QA trends. We looked at out of service, what actually took our equipment out of service. And for 2 years, we actually physically looked at every piece of equipment that went through the auction here in Harrisburg to try and determine what the end of life really was. So we used that information to generate a physical inspection and a score criteria. All the district equipment managers went through and actually used that criteria a few years ago and scored some equipment on their own to basically test and see if it was something that was going to be viable. to have that physical score put on equipment. So with the study of the auction equipment, we wanted to find out what the major failure points were, look at all the data and compare what we actually saw and what the trends were, and identify a useful life to PennDOT equipment instead of trying to go to an industry standard or, you know, say a 5,000 mile cycle on over the road trucks that didn't really apply to what we were doing because of the severe service that our trucks and equipment see. So we had to actually try to come up with a PennDOT equipment number or a life number based on what we're actually physically seeing and what the QAs and auction equipment showed, along with our data points that we dug through in the beginning. So we wanted to see, based on what we saw and what the failure points were, we wanted to see what we could change to extend our useful life. And we want to use that information then to create not only the physical inspection standard, but the benchmarks for each individual key point or data point in the replacement cycle. So we basically wanted to simplify and use this information to establish equipment as a replacement or repair within our fleet. So in the beginning, we started out kind of digging through a lot of information, and what we ended up doing was averaging several scores together, and we used a calculation of the acquisition cost compared to depreciated value, which was kind of a time-based number, our life-to-date fuel compared to a benchmark, which we established by looking at equipment going through the auction, how many gallons of fuel through the life of that vehicle by the time it became out of service. We looked at a life-to-date repair cost compared to the acquisition cost. And we took that same life-to-date total repair cost and compared it to an actual replacement cost for the same piece of equipment at today's price from when we had bought it. So those numbers, like I said, gave us a percentage that we could then average. So what we came up with and what it originally looked like was essentially an overly complicated spreadsheet. But what it left us do was actually put a score or a percentage of life used based on those numbers, you know, those life cycles. And on the far right on the screen, you actually see that we compared that to the time-based life cycle. And what it showed us was some equipment that essentially was out of time on paper wasn't really inefficient. It wasn't costing us more money to operate, but some equipment, you know, basically once we hit that cost threshold, it was well beyond its age in years. So some equipment we're essentially going to be able to look at and keep longer than the time base, and some equipment wasn't efficient to hold on to even halfway through that life cycle. So like I said, this was just a quick snip of that. And the new tool, it took off and basically to try and make a more user-friendly version, it got handed over to a contractor, and they've been working on a graphical user interface for the tool. And I'm kind of beating the drum here, so I'm going to hand it over to Jess and let her take over. She's actually stayed involved in the project the whole way through the development. And this is actually what you came to see, was the innovation part of it, not the old-timey paperwork that we started off with. So I'll hand it over to Jess now to take us into the new tool.
Hi. Okay, the equipment lifecycle prediction tool used to be an Access database, and it was very difficult to upload information into, so that's why we tried to develop a more user-friendly click of a button, your reports are created and they're there for you. So I'll walk you through a couple of some screenshots just to show you kind of what it looks like and give you some details. So here is what the reports and forms are, two main groups. And under the reporting tab, you have various subsections of reports, and under each one of these, there are probably 4 to 5 reports under each section. Just to name a few, the manufacturer comparison, which is a report that can show like equipment to compare that could be more cost effective. Maintenance spending versus capital equipment budget, a quick snapshot of life to date maintenance cost, which that can also be broken down by fiscal year, so you can see compare different fiscal years to see which one was higher and reasons why. An error report was created to help develop and assist the field personnel to fix manual and computer errors in SAP to ensure data accuracy. And these changes update in this tool daily. And then it also shows engine and idle hours, so it also shows you which trucks are idling the most that could have the most maintenance costs and fuel usage, etc.
All right, I'm actually gonna jump back in on the repair versus replace, just to throw a quick note. Basically, this is what I was talking about before, where we're trying to identify a repair versus replace cost. What this tool allows us to do is actually look area by area through the state and identify individual pieces of equipment. And we start to look at them by, well, like Jess mentioned, we can look at the fuel usage and hours per gallon, and we go back into those maintenance costs and the total usage. We can also, because of the mapping that's built into the graphical user interface, we can actually see different areas of the states that are affected differently. So that, harder winters, easier winters, different terrain, hills versus more flat land. What we found out was essentially the equipment is used a lot harder in different regions of the state. Therefore, there's not a one-size-fits-all life cycle. So what this tool allows us to do is break out equipment by how hard it's being used and how much it's costing us per year. So we can look at it more as a business, what's our annual cost to operate versus what it would cost to replace it, to get a new truck. Is it going to pay off to set aside the equipment budget money to get rid of an overly expensive annual cost piece of equipment? So, like I said, it just gives us a nice interface for that. And as you can see there, each county broken down, overall numbers are there, and our overall costs are broken out into different ratios, so you can actually use that for comparison within a county, within a district, or across the state.
And in this tool, it does give you the option that you can select just your replaced equipment and also your repair equipment, so you can compare different counties to different districts and see what is there. Under there's another section off the main page. It's called the forms data management. This in here, you can actually put data in there like the budget, so you can see what the counties are actually spending and what their actual capital equipment budget is. A physical inspection score, which Justin did touch base on, as far as scoring the equipment based on what it looks like, or if there's issues or a new engine that you just put into it, that's why you don't want to get rid of it. You can use that as almost like a backup justification. Again, the shopping cart, which is just a mock-up, so that way you can see like what equipment you want to replace and how many of it that you actually have and what the price of it was or is at the last time it was purchased. In this tool, the data updates, the maintenance cost updates are actually daily. The measuring point data is also daily, which includes your engine and idle hours, fuel, your department usage, your payroll hours, mileage from when you get fuel. This tool also includes all types of equipment, including dump trucks, loaders, spreaders, attenuators, even if it doesn't get fuel. You do have the ability to look on the repair versus replace and remove the non-field equipment, so that way you can just focus on the field equipment if that's what you're looking at. If the piece of equipment was involved in an accident, your maintenance cost is extremely high. You can go into the physical inspection score and actually state that it was involved in an accident, and that's why the cost was high. Who can actually access this tool? Currently, only PennDOT employees have access.
All right, so some things have already improved, even though the new replacement tool isn't completely fielded, parts of it are, but the changes have already started. And that physical inspection, she mentioned that the accidents or replacement engine, those type of costs, as it is now, it doesn't tell the whole story when we pull a report and we see a big number. that gives power back to the counties and the districts to identify pieces of equipment that they put a capital reinvestment into, and therefore, regardless of what the score is, they need to or want to get more years out of it. But some of that early inspection and evaluation of equipment led to truck cleaning procedure guidance being put out, and like Mike mentioned earlier, numerous truck washes were built and retrofitted throughout the state. Needless to say, what we found was corrosion was our biggest failure point. Even when we dug into brake system or fuel system failures or control system failures, a lot of those came back to when we looked at the physical score, those trucks or loaders or pieces of equipment were badly corroded. And that actually led to some of the other system failures. So work order efficiency measures have been added to our quality assurance inspections from this. We now look at the time spent on PMs as well as work orders that didn't have follow-up information added to it. Time-based PMs have been streamlined or removed. There used to be a lot more preventive maintenance activities performed just based on our time. Those have been removed, and essentially we've moved towards quality as opposed to quantity of PMs. We want them to spend quality time with the truck, but not have the truck down and in the garage as often, as well as, like I said, identifying that the trucks need to be cleaned. We created standard variants for tracking and do all of our life-to-date reporting. We basically made it easier for the counties to pull their own reports. The information that we found and what we learned from, we created shortcuts essentially in our tracking software to make it easier for the counties to pull that information themselves and keep an eye on things, to be able to pull and look at this on a more regular basis. More emphasis was put on life-to-date data when deciding what equipment needs to be replaced. There's no penalties, there hasn't been penalties for equipment going past its life cycle. We do encourage everybody to look at the life-to-date actual usage, fuel usage, and repair costs. There's been several pieces of equipment that have been transferred and shared essentially before going to auction, as opposed to just getting rid of a piece of equipment because it's no longer needed. If it has life left in it, we'd like to see some of that life used up. So that moves right into the increased emphasis on sharing. Most of the counties and districts have been sharing for years, but it's been a more of a topic, more of a discussion here the last several years, with more of a push to reduce the fleet and increase the sharing so that we can decrease some of our capital equipment expenditures and like I said, spend more quality time with the equipment instead of just more time with the equipment. And of course, there's also been training. This is just back in here, a lot of the training for field data errors when we get into our life-to-date information and fuel. And I don't know if you want to touch on that. They've been doing a lot of training to help the counties and districts learn how to fix these errors that give us glitches in our life-to-date data in the system.
Yeah, and this has actually brought up a really good point. This tool has actually helped the field for training sessions to be able to help identify what the errors are and how to fix them. And when it opened up so many doors for them that they're all asking for it and setting up meetings, and that for them to actually fix the issues and understand how the system works and what to look for.
Danielle, with that, I guess that finishes up our presentation, as opposed, unless we have some questions, I guess.
First question, could a non-PennDOT employee get access to a blank copy of the software program?
Right now, no. Whether or not that becomes available in the future, I couldn't answer that. I don't know if they can get a blank copy of the software.
That would help.
Moving to internal question. When will the new tool be available for the counties to use?
Some of the tool is actually available now. There are a few reports that are not available, but they will be available in the near future. We're still working out some tweaks and things here and there on a few of the reportings.
Next question is what are other functions of the tool beside ranking equipment?
budget calculations, various types of reports to define errors that could have been manual or computer issues, physical inspection scores so you can rate the truck depending on how bad it is, or if it, just like we said earlier, got replaced with a new engine, you can make note of that as well.
And something else too, once this gets into a full production mode, I think
It's supposed to help.
this is going to help people make decisions when you have a truck that's starting to get older or getting high in cost and an engine drops. This is going to help a county decide whether or not it's worth sinking the money into it, or would they be better off trying to find an auxiliary or another truck from another area, or if it's not in the middle of winter, is it something that we can just let that one go and replace it then the following year? This hopefully is going to give people a little more insight into where they're at as far as life cycle is concerned throughout the year. So when an accident turns up, a vehicle may or may not be worth repairing. As it is right now, we don't have any on-the-fly insight. So if a piece of equipment gets hit or something happens and they need it for production, essentially it has to be repaired. So this is going to hopefully in the future allow us to plan better and tailor our fleet better to meet our needs, so that we're not spending so much money on individual equipment. A good example of that, when we were going through this information, we found several of our foreman crew cabs that were still in the fleet, still operating every day, that had exceeded their life-to-date repair costs, had actually exceeded the cost of a dump truck. Because as the truck went down, or it went down early, they lose engines, lose transmissions, there's no other option because there's no preparation, therefore the truck has to be repaired. So a lot of times these life-to-date repair costs would get away from us, and without an easy way to pull the information, it wouldn't get seen until essentially it was to be sold or down the road years into the process after the money was already gone.
Another question came in. Is there any software PennDOT would recommend to use?
Our software, unfortunately, we don't have a recommendation. Our software is built in SAP, and as far as that was done prior to my coming here, that decision was made based on the rest of the state changing over to SAP. So they built an element within SAP for us to track equipment. I would suggest that anybody outside of PennDOT look into what fleet management softwares are out there. I know there's several different, and I don't know any brand names specifically, but there's several versions of software out there that will not only allow you to track all your equipment, some of them have some of this reporting capability built right into it, as well as order and warehouse replenishment for your filters and all of your other preventive maintenance supplies that go along with it. So unfortunately, I don't have a suggestion, but maybe just get into the Googler and take a dig around, because there's lots of software out there that will do a lot of what we're setting up here without having to put in the heavy lift to build the software.
And the last question I have, how much of a deficit is PennDOT currently facing in their equipment funding?
That's a loaded question. The annual equipment budget it's been coming in around 40 million. It's been that way for a while. The last time we ran a full life cycle, it's going to take us about $100 million to replace our equipment that's out of cycle. If we were to continue with the existing life cycle, we need about 70 million a year to replace equipment. Our critical core equipment, we're actually coming in just over 40 million, which is our total equipment budget. So our goal is to balance by extending the life cycle of equipment on in a realistic way, not based on any kind of standards, but what we find with our equipment, and then extend our usable life cycle through closer tracking and better preventive maintenance activities. And also, like you just sat through the presentation on our wheel refinishing, and Mike mentioned the truck wash. A lot of that stuff is hopefully going to extend the life cycle of a lot of this equipment if we can start to refurbish and just take better care with the cleanliness and refinishing while we're running the equipment.
All right, Justin and Jessica, that's all the questions we have at this time. Certainly we thank you for your time today. Great presentation. Again, just a reminder to our audience members, if you do have any questions for any of our presenters, please use the chat pod, again, located on the right-hand side of your screen, to submit your questions. We're going to move on to our next group of presenters. Again, if we do have additional questions for the others that have presented so far in this session, we'll circle back to them at the end of the session. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our next group of presenters. We have Ryan Medvitz, who is the Maintenance Manager for PennDOT's District 12. We have Ken Baer, who is the Maintenance Services Engineer for PennDOT's District 3. And Jason Daly, who is the Public Works Director for Cranberry Township, located in Butler County. I'd like to welcome Ryan, Ken, and Jason to today's session. Ryan, you now have control.
Okay, thanks, Danielle. So the three of us were asked to present on some new and innovative ideas that were used here to keep PennDOT and municipal operations running during the COVID-19 pandemic. Ken and I are going to touch on some of PennDOT's, and Jason is going to cover what he's doing there in Cranberry Township. So by this presentation, it's not an all-inclusive. There are a lot of many new things that are happening throughout this pandemic, but we're all just going to touch on some of the highlights with the time that we have. So the first topic I'm going to cover today is telework. Prior to 2020, this is something that was not used very much within PennDOT. So there was a lot of unknown with how it would work out and how everything would still function moving into a telework environment. The first thing that was done was a series of VPN tests. This was done in the weeks prior to the statewide shutdown. All of the employees there at PennDOT were instructed to take their laptops home to test their VPN and their internet connections, and then work with IT to resolve any issues that they may have. This was done in preparation for what was seen as a coming statewide shutdown. So next, district and county response plans were developed. They were developed for each county and district to identify who would be able to telework, who would be placed on a paid office closing leave, and who would be deemed essential and required to report to work. Each county organization and maintenance identified response crews who would report to work and handle any maintenance concerns that came up during the shutdown. Majority of the employees, approximately 50%, were put on telework status, and then the remaining were placed on the paid office closing. Next, we had daily unit update calls that were implemented after telework started. This would initially comprised of unit managers from design, construction, and maintenance, along with the DEs and the ADEs in that district. And then we also had individual unit calls for each unit or for each area that were led by each ADE. These were all initially set up to discuss the evolving COVID situation statewide and distribute any new information that was given on those statewide DE calls. As of now, the calls have evolved a lot to discuss more work tasks that are being completed and provide a platform to keep everyone in the chain of command in communication, just to make sure that we're getting our day-to-day tasks completed and everyone's being productive through telework. And it's also been scaled back from daily calls to more 2 or 3 days per week, just to allow for more field operations and provide less or require less time for you to be on the phone throughout the week. Next, we have computer monitors for telework. Beginning sometime in July, computer monitors started to be distributed to employees to use at home while teleworking. And these were additional monitors. Not the ones assigned to employees at their offices, which allowed them to do work at their office location if needed and not have to transport the monitors back and forth with them. It's been very helpful, as most employees only have a small laptop screen to look at, so having that extra screen is definitely increased production and help get tasks done quicker. Next, we have virtual HOP inspections. Once our utility and permit work started back up from the initial shutdown, we needed to come up with a solution to provide inspection of the work being done on our roadways. It was developed so that the permittee has daily communication with our PennDOT inspectors. They have to provide photo documentation of the work performed, a log of the work activities, any material certifications and test results, and anything else that documents that the roadway has been properly restored to PennDOT specifications. Along with this, the work can be shut down and denied for failure at any time whenever these requirements are not complied with by the permittee. Next, we have, sorry, wrong button. Next, we have resuming our maintenance operations. So this was set up into a 3-tier approach, similar to the governor's red, yellow, and green phases, and it was rolled out in those 3 tiers. The initial tier was in place from day one of the shutdown, and that was those crews that were deemed as essential and they were working on life-sustaining and emergency activities. The second tier was the next group of employees identified to return to work that were initially on paid office closing, and they would be working on aspects of highway maintenance that are critical to the safety of the traveling public. And then along with that, some of the support functions that we have in the district that go along with this, such as that came back and permitted field activities, but continued telework for a lot of the district staff. This second tier was implemented mid-April, right around the time that the paid office closing leave expired, and returned about 50% of our maintenance staff to work, and the remaining 50% were off. And then the final tier 3 was the remainder of the maintenance employees that were unable to telework and would be then they came back to work on resuming preventive maintenance operations. This was implemented at the beginning of May and returned the remainder of our maintenance staff to work, and also got rental vendors and our roadside contractors back as well. Next, the work startup questionnaire. This was developed to get approval for teleworking employees to enter our department facilities, and it's filled out by a supervisor and sent to our central office area command for final approval. And this is done anytime that a teleworking employee has to get into the office for any reason. That's still in use today. And then finally, with the success of this current telework environment, Office of Administration is working on a permanent telework policy that's going to be used post-COVID. Not a lot of details on that as of this time, as it's still under development, but it's something to look forward to in the future. Next, I'll discuss some of the new safety policies that were developed to deal with COVID. All of these are available on our PennDOT safety portal. The first one, Protocol 32, has to deal with cleaning vehicles. It identifies tasks that should be done daily and then routine cleaning activities, and also provides examples of what are frequently touched surfaces that should be cleaned both daily and routinely. Protocol 33 is cleaning surfaces in general, not just vehicles. It identifies how to clean the surfaces when a probable or confirmed case has been identified somewhere near, and also just provides a little guidance on what you should be using to clean those surfaces. Protocol 34 has to deal with heat exposure and wearing of PPE. Identifies when face coverings must be worn, when it's permissible to remove them, and then some techniques to prevent heat illness during field activities. And this was put in place to help our maintenance staff that had to work in the middle of summer out in the field while wearing their face coverings. Next, there's guidelines for field work activities. There's 3 separate ones that were developed. One for field inspection. There was a set of guidelines developed for safety coordinators and our quality assurance field staff to conduct their daily inspections safely. Another set of guidelines was set up for design field activities, which instructed consultant firms to develop a COVID safety plan, which needed to be reviewed and accepted by PennDOT prior to them returning to their field work. And then finally, there was a guideline for maintenance field activities developed. It was a longer document that identified typical maintenance activities and protocols that were going to be required to be followed for each one. and also identified responsibilities such as wearing masks and social distancing that our employees must be following, and provided guidance for managers to manage sick employees, and provided some external resources to be followed there. Next document that was developed, was some guidance on working with customers, identified a series of ways to protect our employees and our customers whenever they had to interact at our facilities. And then it also identified how we handle mail and any deliveries that we had to get. A CDL testing guidance during COVID was developed. This is guidance that was developed by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and was pretty much adopted from them for PennDOT to follow. Next, an employee awareness checklist was developed. This 3-page document that was designed to make all employees aware of what they must do while they're at work. Pretty much as a summary of all the above policies, and put all the requirements in the one document that anyone could go to at any time if there was a question. And it covers personal responsibilities, social distancing, face coverings, how to use gloves properly, hand washing, common areas and frequently touched surfaces, and then cleaning materials and supplies and what's available. And then finally, there was a training developed for proper cleaning and donning of PPE, which reviewed what PPE is to be used, how to dispose of the PPE and cleaning supplies, and then how to maintain the safety of all employees during the COVID pandemic. And then the final topic I'm going to touch on is virtual training. So initially, all in-person training was postponed at the onset of the statewide shutdown. That led to some questions of how we were going to continue to train all of our employees. So as the shutdown continued on, we needed to find a way to resume these trainings in all of our large academies. And we were noticing as we were having all these daily calls that Skype was giving us a lot of issues. Large training sessions caused a lot of connectivity issues. And there's also not many training options, such as like polling and questions and exams. Stuff like that can't be done within Skype. So our maintenance manager training committee, which MMTC, which I am a part of, we developed a list of available training software and did a cost and feature comparison among all those available, and kind of developed like a scoring matrix with and then the top candidates on that scoring matrix were sent to our executive leadership for approval. Our goal was to purchase a new training software that was all inclusive, that could easily deliver these large academies virtually. Ultimately, our WebEx was selected as the best based on its cost, number of participants that can attend a training, and its available features. That WebEx software started out for maintenance and is also going to be used now to hold winter construction schools this year. And I'm sure it's going to be pushed out into other trainings as the year goes on. So within that, the MMTC was broken down into subcommittees to look at our four large training academies that we hold each year. Those four: highway foreman, assistant maintenance manager, roadway programs coordinator, and highway maintenance manager. There's a lot of other smaller trainings that are being converted right now to virtual, but these are the major four that are handled and oversaw by the committee. So they're designed to be more interactive and not just watching a training video. So that's why we had to come up with a different way to deliver these. So these subcommittees were set up to review the existing training materials that were already in place from previous years, and get with the presenters to update anything as necessary, and kind of prepare the presenters for that virtual delivery. 2 of these academies have already been held. Virtual Highway Foreman Academy was held in August for the first time. It consisted of a 4-week training that was held on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays for that 4 weeks. The Tuesday and Thursday sessions were all virtual, led by presenters going through traditional PowerPoints and doing question and answer and exam type stuff. And then the Wednesdays of each week were set aside for 3 different field exercises that were led by district personnel. So each attendee from across the state got with their district, with their subject matter experts for those field exercises and performed them, and then took a test at the end. Overall, the feedback for this Highway Foreman Academy was positive. The biggest comments that we got back were dealt with the presenters getting more participation out of the attendees. So part of the follow up to this, there's training being started now to give to the presenters to teach them different ways to get the participation out of the attendees. Initially, we had planned on the final week of Highway Foreman Academy coinciding with the first week of Assistant Maintenance Manager Academy because the topics do overlap each other. But we decided to push it off and do them at separate times to allow the feedback to come so we can improve on the next one. The Assistant Manager Academy was just held in October. So it had a similar approach to Foreman Academy with 4 weeks of training. And like I said, we implemented a few changes to improve the delivery of them. We're waiting on feedback back from that one as it just wrapped up. So again, we're gonna use that to improve on the roadway programs coordinator and the highway maintenance manager, which we're currently planning on holding in the spring of 2021. At this time, we're planning on virtual, depending on what changes may come, but those are yet to be held. So with that, I will turn it over to Kent Bear to continue with the presentation.
Thanks, Ryan. Are you going to advance this screen for me? Thank you. One of the most significant hurdles for districts and counties to overcome due to COVID-19 was the reduction of our budget due to reduced travel and the use of fuel across our state. County maintenance budgets were reduced by $280 million statewide for the spring of 2020 through July of 2021. The impacts to the spring budgets were finalized in the April of 2020, leaving the districts and the counties needing to quickly adapt and plan for remaining work for just our May and June. Instead of a spring, which would have seen additional work in the counties due to a light winter, counties were forced to reduce programs to perform only critical operations. In District 3, critical reductions included eliminating our tree trimming contract except for emergencies, reducing our spring contracted mowing to 1 cycle versus 2 for our interstates, eliminating our contracted herbicide spraying for spring of 2020, eliminating our rented equipment and all of our planned department force resurfacing projects through July 1st of 2020, reducing our seal coat by 500,000 gallons, and deferring some of our maintenance-funded microsurfacing and resurfacing contracts. The program cuts that I noted were not enough to cover the $280 million reduction, and the budget's reductions left our counties without funding to pay for some of our basic needs such as personnel, fuel, materials, and critical repairs. In order to continue our operations, alternate transportation funding was used to support the county basic needs. For example, one of the programs that was cut was our roadback program, which is dedicated to improving our secondary roadways. So we had to find other means to take care of those roads, which would include interim seal coats. Another significant area that impacted district maintenance was the ability to provide sanitary supplies for our employees. District offices began teleworking on March 16th, and counties reduced reporting personnel to bridge and sign crews to address emergencies in each county. All of our county crews returned back to work on April 13th of 2020. While counties had initial supplies for the crews, replacing these supplies became increasingly difficult, with items such as hand sanitizer, masks, paper towels, and water jugs quickly disappearing from our vendors' shelves. Due to the shortage of hand sanitizer, we looked for several ways to ensure that our crews were able to wash their hands frequently. Hand washing stations, as shown on the left-hand side of this slide were rented and placed at all of our outlying stockpiles and field offices. Truck water tanks, also pictured on this slide, were ordered to provide crews a water source on the job for washing their hands. Reporting individuals to the district received hand sanitizer, a mask, paper towels, and a 32-ounce spray bottle of Clorox to wipe down their vehicle surfaces. Reporting crews, such as our survey and our bridge inspection crew, were provided the same kits, except due to the shortage of hand sanitizer, water jugs were provided, including the ones with the electric pump to dispense water, as shown on this slide. The storage and tracking of supplies also became extremely important, and the district dedicated one of our small conference rooms to store items, and the district fiscal unit also developed a tracking sheet and communication chain for replenishing these items. As we enter winter, the hand wash stations will have to be removed from the stockpiles, but fortunately, the supply of hand sanitizer is now plentiful, and it also has a low freezing point. So we're installing hand sanitizer stations at all entry locations of our stockpiles and our field offices. COVID-19 also impacted the management of our pool car fleet. To encourage pool vehicle users not to enter the district office, we placed a portable toilet and a hand washing station at our pool vehicle area. Monthly fuel receipts and monthly mile tracking were previously submitted through paper copy submissions. These are now turned in electronically, or users provide all of their mileage using a new app. To ensure our vendors follow the same procedures we require of our staff, we now complete a checklist, which is submitted and approved at the district and central office level. The checklist ensures vendors are aware of and comply with the new safety protocols prior to entering our facilities. A final area of impact to district maintenance was the alterations required for our facilities. As guidance for social distancing was developed, our facility staff assessed necessary changes and began to install items to ensure that the office was ready if employees needed to return. All of the changes were completed by July. These changes included installing plexiglass at reception areas and other desks where social distancing could not be maintained. An example of this is shown in the photo on the left-hand side of this slide. We also extended cubicle walls to create barriers between individuals where necessary. We posted signs outside and inside of lobbies, conference rooms, restrooms, and elevators indicating the maximum occupancy for each room. And we removed chairs and marked a dedicated location to support social distancing in our conference rooms. Finally, we upgraded existing hand soap, paper towel dispensers, and flushing devices to be touchless throughout our district office and county facilities at a cost of almost $60,000. While we faced many obstacles through COVID-19 pandemic, we also continued to successfully adapt, and we continued our operations. I asked our facility staff the top 3 benefits to no one reporting to the district office on a daily basis since March. They included the following: no coffee spilled in the stairwell to clean up, no complaints about lack of parking or someone not parking straight, and no toilets to unclog. I'll now turn the presentation over to Jason Daly, who's going to provide some information on how municipalities adapted to COVID-19.
Great. Thank you so much. Such great information, and I do feel like the a lot of the items that we've touched on so far, probably many of us that are on the presentation here can probably relate to these items. From the fleet efforts that were made to our internal operations. From a municipal perspective, the much smaller, tighter look at a lot of the impacts that this has had on our operation. A little background on Cranberry. We are located out here in the western part of the state, but we're a full service community serving 35,000 residents, a very healthy commercial population. And one of the things about Cranberry is that we provide water service, so we handle all the billing and field work that might be involved with that, the metering, meter reading, as well as for the sewer collection system. We've recently introduced a stormwater fee, and so there's, we interact a lot with the public on that particular issue, as well as our solid waste program. So trash collection, we're very intimately involved with all of those services. We also have a very healthy Parks and Rec program. So there's always a lot of people that are coming into the municipal building. We have a very healthy park system, so our parks are very active, our sports associations, and right whenever COVID was coming on strong with us, we started to realize that we had to react quickly to continue to serve the public and do that in an effective way. So the items that I'm going to be talking about here, really are going to be what our reaction points were, how we handled that both internally for our staff and also, and more importantly for our public-facing needs that we had. So. This first item here, I mentioned talk about our facility management and access to our facility. We tried to remain open. We went to virtual where we could, but we have a lot of folks who wanted to have drop-off payments and for in order to keep up with their utility payments. So, we had to make sure that folks felt safe when they walked into the building. We overemphasized with signage our disinfection plan that we had in place, and then whenever we had internal issues, if we had someone who might have come down with the flu or had a suspected positive symptoms, we enacted our some increased cleaning protocols for those particular workspaces or areas. We made sure that we were very transparent with our internal staff on that, as well as to the public. And I think that went a long way for how our efforts were perceived by the public and by our staff. Internally, we have a preschool. As well as rooms that are regularly used in our municipal complex. It took a toll, a very heavy toll on the labor that was needed to get out there and clean those facilities. So we started to roll out these UVC disinfectant devices, new light fixtures that are used in the preschool setting, in between classroom changes, as well as meeting changes in some of our library facilities that we own and maintain. Those were utilized. I have to tell you that didn't come without some learning curve involved with that. It seemed like as soon as you popped open the brought up Google and started to search for UV disinfectant devices, you could buy these things. Everybody was putting these together. We had to get our staff educated on how these worked, what the safety protocols were that needed to be used whenever we started to roll these out, and how to use them on a regular basis. They have been a great introduction to our disinfectant program, have saved staff a ton of time. And again, fortunately, we have had 0 positive cases in those areas where we're using these. So, I can attest to that aspect of it, to their effectiveness. Getting people in and out, both visitors as well as staff. We introduced these autothermal scanning devices that are also tied to staff's access control. So when an individual would walk up to these, as soon as they enter the building, they swipe their card, their employee badge. It recognizes their face and ties their temperature being taken to their access card. This has been great. If somebody registers with a high temperature as they're entering the building, we use this for visitors as well. We have visitor badges that we issue. But if somebody triggers it with a high temperature reading, it automatically notifies that building's manager, as well as HR and our safety program coordinator, who, the red alert goes off. The individual, there's a message that comes up on the scanner that says that they need to go to their car and notify their supervisor. And it deactivates their access control for the rest of the facility, or any township facility that may have access from that card. These took a little bit of time to get put in place. There was some programming issues that we had. So again, some learning curves with this. They're all Android devices. I think probably one of the hardest things that we've had with this is that obviously people are short and tall, and you have to make it so people can adjust that thing so it hits them just right to take their temperature. But this has saved us a lot of aggravation of people having to come in, take their temperatures with the thermometer guns and write their names down, and then someone was reviewing those forms. It's all automated now, so managers are getting their employees' temperatures and the fact that they did take their temperatures every morning, which is great. We've also utilized QR codes. Fortunately, what a great free service this is. You can't go into a restaurant right now, without getting the menu and just using your phone, not having to touch things anymore. We're using this anywhere we possibly can right now. So, for instance, when our staff goes to our sewage treatment plant for meetings, or if other staff members go from area to area, we're using these as well as sign-in locations for safety tracking as well. So individuals will scan in the QR code. They'll just, they have to type in their name and select the facility that they're going into. But then the manager of that facility gets a notification of that as well. So it's just one more way that we're using to try to eliminate those touch points. A free service that these are provided through has made that just an excellent, thing for us as well. The next item, I'm trying to just advance the slide here. Okay, I mentioned about our Parks and Rec facilities. Again, everybody's facilities around the Commonwealth here have been, greatly used. We've seen so many more people coming to our facilities. People are walking more on the paths, using our exercise equipment more. But this has also served, as kind of a wake-up call for us that, with that level of attention that our parks and grounds are receiving, the service level expectations are that much higher as well. So we've tried to communicate out to the public via our website, as well as we have regular email groups that are out there, just letting everyone know that we are actively addressing the playground equipment, wiping things down, common touch points where children regularly congregate. We've increased our inspections on the equipment, mainly for the safety use of that equipment, like the swing sets, especially. We've noticed our sports courts and adult facilities have gotten a lot more use as well. Whenever the event was ramping up in March and was in full swing by late spring there, we had a lot of requests to have our restroom facilities opened even sooner than when we normally would have opened them. With cold temperatures, even people were asking for our facilities to be opened up. As soon as those were opened, that increased our level of attention as well. That has some challenges to work through with making sure that staff had all the proper outfitting that they needed and PPE for cleaning those facilities on a regular basis. Because of the increased use, we were seeing a lot more, and consequently with schools being out a little bit sooner this year, we also saw an increase in some of the vandalism, right? Kids around the parks and around some of the grounds, that naturally increased our attention that we had to give that. We also were able to utilize our internal camera system. Typically we were using these perhaps to count vehicles as they would come in, using those for different metrics, but we were able to actually use these to help judge facility cleaning needs as well, or where possible court attention or playgrounds that may need additional cleanings. We were able to track their use a little bit more with the use of our internal camera system. So that was all very helpful for us. Some of the public service impacts that we had, just in general for us, we had a lot of bid projects that were out there internally, like our paving program. We also had a major construction project that's been underway that had to be put on hold. It was our MSA throughway that's going under State Route 228. Major project for this region, for our community especially, and that project was delayed a bit. So we had to kind of work with the contractors on these projects. We had to, be flexible and work with them, keeping them in the loop as to what our strategies were going to be for inspections and payments, requests, all those types of things. So we really had to retool ourselves internally to help work through that with them and to kind of put them at ease as well. Some of the things that I mentioned before, the fact that we are a public utility provider, our calls for service, a lot of folks, if their trash was missed or if they had a leak in their home, a water leak in their home or a sewer clog, despite the fact that we were under pandemic protocol, those issues still needed to be addressed. And we did develop protocol internally on how to deal with that. For those communities that, weren't, that don't manage that themselves, I did talk with them about how their contractors were handling that. So, we really tried to get out in front of that and have a system in place so that our staff were comfortable with it, but that we also had the customers educated as to what they could expect when our folks arrived at their door, how they should act, the masks, maintaining distance, and that seemed to work great. I think that it was appreciated exactly how we were approaching those needs. Lastly, we've always used mass notification systems, but I feel like we really were able to engage with our social media, as well as we have several different mass notification systems based around the utility that's being served, but we really started to rely on those rather than going and placing door knockers for terminations, or for, when we've had a couple water breaks, how we would go and notify our customers with that. The mass notification system was imperative for us, and I was glad that we were very prudent in years prior, keeping our customer database information current. I know that that's a challenge with transient communities and with communities that have high turnover, and we put a lot of emphasis on that. And I feel like that really paid off for us in this instance, in us being able to communicate quickly information that we needed to in a pinch, being able to keep people updated on those needs. So those were just a couple items there that I wanted to share, how us as a local government fared through some of those challenges early on. I wanted to thank you guys so much for sticking around, listening to our presentation on how we handled this at the state level as well as locally. And I think at this time we'll open it up for questions.
Hey, Jason. We'll start out. We have a couple questions that pertain to things you mentioned on your slides. The first one was, what did the UVC disinfectant devices cost per unit?
Sure. The the light fixtures were around the $200 mark. The floor models were between $500 and $2,500, depending on what model we selected and the size of the room space. I really felt like the bigger bang for our buck was in the light fixtures, though, because the individual room educators are able to manage that program. They seem like they needed to call on our maintenance staff to help them with the other floor-based models.
Then looking at the next one of the next items you talked about, what was the cost of the auto thermal scanning devices?
Sure, they were around $2,000 each. And we installed those in most of our facilities. So for about $2,000, it came with the software. We did have to have some integration with our access control software, which is Tyler Tyco software house. So there was some integration that was needed in order to make that functional and to provide better reports. So there was some additional work that we had to do with that. I don't know what that cost was, but the units themselves were around $2,000.
Okay. Ken and Ryan, from the department side, what will the lasting impacts be with the reduction of budget? What are they going to have on the effects they're going to have on PennDOT?
This is Ken. Some of the items that we're going to have to do is reprioritize some of our planned projects, looking at possibly doing some interim treatments, some seal coats on roads that we were planning to resurface, or possibly an interim resurfacing on some of our reconstruction projects, just so we can kind of rebalance the budget for some of the money that was lost.
And then a follow-up to that, does anyone currently report to your district office?
In District 3, the only individuals that are reporting are our facilities staff. As Ryan had mentioned, we also have a process in place where employees request entry into the district office. It's then logged on a spreadsheet and reviewed just to confirm that we do not have too many individuals in there at one time, and then also to be able to monitor those individuals while they are in there in case we have an emergency, and then provide any type of necessary cleaning when they're complete.
And we're structured the same way in District 12. Just our facilities, our facilities maintenance folks are the only people that are daily, and then we have the same spreadsheet in place to track who comes in on a day-to-day basis and keep it minimized.
Jason, over to you. For Cranberry Township, are there any special practices that you are planning to follow for your winter maintenance operations related to your Department of Public Works facility administration or any other operations for the township?
Sure. The biggest change that we currently do have disinfectant protocol in place for when vehicles are used. Our vehicles are assigned to a route, and those routes, individuals are assigned to the routes themselves. So it'll be mostly the same person in the same vehicle. We're pretty fortunate to have that to be in place. But the biggest change that we're expecting to put in place is just going to be that when folks do report, that we're going to have possibly staggered report times and work to keep them separated at the time of reporting. Oftentimes we come together even during a major event, possibly for a meal, or if there's a whiteout going on, that everyone will kind of congregate in to get off the road. That type of thing. We really are working to try to eliminate those congregation points this winter.
And we'll go with one more for a wrap up. For Cranberry Township, your initiatives appear to be heavily relying on a workforce that can respond. How are you prepared for an outbreak internally?
Sure. I mean, biggest fear, right? The fact that we can't regulate our folks off time and what they're going to be doing out there. We do encourage all the same type of safety protocols that that we're initiating here at the workplace to be followed at home and whenever folks are on the weekend. But we have thought about that, so we do start to think about backup plans from other divisions within our operation. As soon as we feel like we have those upfront protocols in place to help monitor individuals when they enter buildings and whenever they come onto the property. So hopefully we can arrest that when whenever those symptoms are first being manifest in that individual. But once we do get notification of someone who does have possible symptoms, we initiate that heavy cleaning protocol. But if it does at some point work its way through our operation, we are relying on the fact that we can pull from other divisions, with our CDL drivers, multiple tiered operators who can step in and handle those responsibilities from the other divisions.
Thank you, Jason. Also, my thanks to Ken and Ryan. Just some great examples of how you and your respective teams have adapted here during some very trying times. So we appreciate all of you presenting here today. We're about at time here. We did receive a few additional questions in. Since we are out of time, what we will do is we'll follow up with those speakers to get answers to those questions, and we'll distribute those to the audience who participated here today. So just as a few final reminders, again, we invite you to check out our virtual exhibit hall on our event website. Again, that's www.penndot.gov/innovationsweek. Again, more than 50 innovations and smart practices are out there for viewing from federal, state, local government. So definitely check that out. If you do have questions about any of those particular innovations, there is a contact form out there. Just use that form to submit your question, and we'll get you connected with the subject matter expert for that particular innovation. Again, one final reminder too is that the recordings from Virtual Innovation Week sessions will be available on the event website within the next week or so. So I invite you to go back and check out that event website if you want to listen to any of the recordings from the event. Also, for this particular session, if you click on the participation link in the calendar invitation you received for today's session, you'll also be able to hear a playback of today's session as well. So with that, we are at the 3 o'clock hour. Again, my thanks to our presenters as well as our audience for joining us today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening. Thank you.